You're live.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Welcome to our 2218 Saturday night speaker meeting. I'm Annette, and I am an alcoholic. Shall we start out with the Serenity Prayer? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Peace. Yeah, as I said, I'm Annette Ward. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of the Alana Society of Minneapolis, which we refer to as 2218. So I already said welcome to 2218 Saturday night speaker meeting. This is an open meeting and all are welcome. We feature members of recovery to share with us their experience, strength, and hope. For 78 years, 2218 has been a self-supporting home to recovery. Our main source of income is our membership. We encourage you to become a pledging member. Feel free to see me or Eric or anybody at our front desk to learn more about this opportunity. We have pledge forms upstairs. Up there at the front desk. The second way 2218 is self-supporting is through our own contributions. We will pass the basket now. There's a caffeinated coffee available here. You can throw your donation for the coffee in the basket as well. Donations help keep our lights on, heating and air conditioning, water and sewer, and maintaining the building, which was originally built in 1887. It's an old place. As we pass the basket, please be sure to silence your cell phones and electronic devices. Couple announcements. We got the third annual Ride for Recovery coming up June 26, 2021. If anybody would like to volunteer at that or at for anything at 2218, I have volunteer forms up at the front desk. And then we'll have the Pat Cronin birthday bash on September 11. I have asked Christy to come up and read the preamble.
Hi, I'm Christy. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Christy.
There it is.
Thank you. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help other alcoholics to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Thank you, Christy. I have asked Eric to come up and read how it works. You have it memorized, right?
Yeah. One day. Hello, everybody. My name is Eric. I'm in recovery.
Yeah.
How it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these, we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order, I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And C, that God could and would if he were sought. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, so I wrote this thing and now I can't remember. I would like to now welcome our speaker, Dave J. I met Dave at an Area 36 AA assembly, I think in Mankato, the first time I saw this character. And then gotten to know him over the years, and really glad he could come all the way up from Northfield to share what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now with us. I'm excited. Come, welcome, Dave. Do you want a microphone? We have microphone condoms.
I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm Dave. I'm an alcoholic. Are you leaving? I have to be up here all by
I'm not
myself?
going to sit behind you.
Now I'm scared. By the grace of God, I've been sober since August 21st of 2012. My first drink was at the age of 7. So if you do the math, roughly of drinking. How many people are new kind of to recovery? A few of us. All right. There's a number of things that I like to talk about when I speak, and one of those is why it took me 33 years. Because my first court-ordered treatment was at the age of 12 years old. So if you do the math, that's I got roughly 30 years, right? Something like that. So in that time, so being court-ordered to treatment at 12, I went to a place called St. Mary's, which is now Fairview Riverside. At the time, I was the youngest person ever court-ordered to a treatment program. And there were teenagers in there giving me a lot of crap, like, how can you be an alcoholic? And obviously throughout the years, when I walked in here in August of 2012, I had destroyed my life sufficiently to the point to where I had to find a different way of living, or I was actually just going to kill myself. And so I did not walk in here thinking that this would cure me. I thought, if Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't work, then I give myself the opportunity to take that next door. And so I didn't believe this would work. I had no comprehension of what I was getting into when I walked in here. And so that 30 years in and out of the program, obviously at the age of 12 and being court-ordered treatment, a lot of us probably have been court-ordered, and we're told we have to be here. Some of us have to sign cards. And I remember sitting in meetings and not really picking up what other people are laying down. And just to get this out of the way, this suit was $100 on Amazon. And I only wear this because I'm supposed to show you that things can be different if you have an Amazon account, apparently. But yeah, I thought it looked good. So because when I walked in here, I couldn't afford a suit. And so I used to wonder why people would get so dressed up and come up and speak. And then I realized, you know what? We're supposed to show you that things can be different. So this is my showing you. Now I can take this off. So I'm not taking it all off. So at the age of 12, obviously, I don't think I have an alcoholism problem. I do want to get one thing out of the way. Since this is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, we're allowed to talk a little bit about our drug. Is this my phone? Who broke it? I also had a $100,000 a year coke habit when I walked in here. So I obviously qualify for the rooms of NA as well, and I do sponsor and speak in the rooms of NA. The reason I chose Alcoholics Anonymous, you can come up and talk to me after the meeting, but there were some very specific reasons relating to me as to why I chose Alcoholics Anonymous over Narcotics Anonymous. And they have nothing to do with the fellowship at NA. They had to do with where I was at the time. And one of those is, if you've ever been in an NA meeting and seen that group of girls getting out of the van, you know you're going to relapse. And so that's one of the things that I wasn't encountering in AA. So I had to distance myself from that, just so you know. So I was an orphan. My first drink at the age of 7, I had run away from the orphanage in Austin, Minnesota, and obviously at that age, you really don't realize how big the world is. So I would ride around on a stolen bike that I stole from the orphanage looking for my mom. And I ended up in this little park in downtown Austin. And I remember I was I coerced one of my orphan mates, or whatever you call them, to come with me. And we're in this park. And the first time looking back, you don't realize that it's so weird. But the first time I can visibly see alcoholism present in my life was everybody was cruising, so they were sitting outside their cars drinking beers. And I remember walking up to people, hey, have you seen my mom? And I'm trying to describe her. I don't really remember her name. I know her as Mom. And somebody thought it'd be cool to give these 7-year-old kids each a beer. And so we gladly accepted, because, I felt like I fit in. Like somebody had finally accepted me into their group. And so I took that beer and I drank it the only way I had ever seen beer drank, and I slammed it. And I remember the way it made me feel. But more than the way it made me feel, how I felt accepted, how I felt like I was a part of something for once. And I also remember the guy that I had run away with. He tried his and he didn't like it, so I drank his too. And I didn't realize that that's abnormal, right? Like, so I'm 7 and I just chugged 2 beers, and this kid, he has a normal reaction to alcohol. Ugh, I don't like it. And so that was the first time looking back that I can actually see alcoholism at work in my life. On through the years growing up, so I went to live with a foster family in Cokato, Minnesota, and I was always getting in trouble. And it's not that I'm a troublemaker. I am, I guess. But realistically, I never felt a part of anything. And so I'm hanging out with the wrong people, doing the wrong things, trying to be a part of. And all my life, so one of the interesting phrases that we talk about in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we just read it, is having had a spiritual awakening. And we talk about this being a spiritual program. And I'm like, easy, Jesus, I'm not interested. And what I don't realize is that spirituality has absolutely nothing to do with God. Spirituality and God can be two different things. Now I can use spirituality to find God, and I can find God through a spiritual practice, but the two are kind of separate, and I had no idea. That's why the phrase "we are spiritual but not religious" didn't make sense when I walked in here. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, because to me, one of the big barriers to me even getting into this thing was the fact that I would have to confront this idea of God. And that was a very foreboding idea when I walked into the rooms. By the age of 16, 17, I'm in and out of juvenile jail, I guess, for lack of a better words. And looking back, all of my trouble in everything that I did had alcohol or drugs attached to it. Like, I wasn't out committing crimes sober. I was always drunk or under the influence, trying to impress people, trying to do things to get the alcohol or the drugs. By the time I was 19, I had done enough things that I ended up in St. Cloud prison. And my first spiritual experience occurred to me as I was standing in line in the lunch line at prison. And back in the day, St. Cloud was 18 to 21, and now it's just intake, and then they send you out to wherever you go. But back then it was just a select group of people, and mostly younger people. And so we're in this lunch line, and I'm doing 2 years for burglary and auto theft. And I'm standing in line, and the guy in front of me is like, "Come on, man, give me an extra piece of bread." And I remember thinking, who does this guy think he is? Why does he think he deserves something more than I'm going to get? And then it hit me right there. Dave, that's your problem. You think the world owes you something. The world doesn't owe you anything. You have to go out and make your own. And up until that point, being an orphan, coming from a background of having no money, all I had ever done all my life is I see something that you have that I like, I take it because I can't afford it. And I don't mean to steal to be a dick. I can't afford what you have. And so it was at that moment in that line where the light turned on. And it took me 2 years to learn to stop stealing. I didn't quit drinking after that, so I would get drunk, go out and steal stuff once I got released. And then the next night, sober, I'd go and break back in and put it back. But eventually, after about 2 years, I learned to stop stealing, and it all started in that lunch line. We talk about spiritual experiences and spiritual awakening, and that was my first one. And I didn't realize the significance of that time, of what that was at that time, until I actually ended up starting to do some of this work. And I realized that those spiritual experiences are sometimes slow, sometimes fast, as we talk about. I got out of prison at the age of 22. And I swore I would never go back. One of the conditions of my parole was no use of mind-altering substances. Now, I read that. I even signed my name to it. But what I interpreted that as is don't get caught using. Not don't use. I mean, that's ridiculous. But don't get caught using, right? So they would come and do their UA and do the checkout. And guess what I would do as soon as they left? I'd drink. Right? What I didn't realize is they'd seen that game played before, and so eventually I ended up back on a revocation of my parole, and I ended up doing 6 months in Lionel Lakes on a cot, reading books. It sucked. But what I didn't realize is that most people who don't have an alcohol or drug addiction would read that and say, okay, well, I'm just not going to use, right? Most people who have an allergy to bananas don't read and say, you know what, you can't take this without having a repercussion. They're not like, what about banana substitutes, right? But we as alcoholics and addicts, we're like, well, but what if you don't catch me, right? And so I didn't, if you would have asked me at that time, I would have said, well, I don't think I'm an alcoholic or an addict. I think that I just really enjoy it, right? We have 100 excuses as to why we use, but none of them ever really make sense, as the big book says, in the light of the havoc that a drinking bout creates. And I never really comprehended that. And a lot of people, you know, on through my life, a lot of people are saying, you're in denial, you're in denial. I will tell you, from the age of 12, I knew I was an alcoholic and a drug addict. I knew it. There was no denying that. But I was delusional. I was delusional. I wasn't in denial, but I was in delusion as to my capability of managing and controlling my alcoholism and my drug addiction. I committed somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 20 felonies in my life, and not one of them was ever done sober. I've been arrested for over 9 DWIs, not one of them sober, right? By the time I got here well, I'm skipping forward, but by the time I got here in 2012, I was looking at going back to prison, the one place where I said I never would be again. And it was devastating to me because it showed me that I had no control over my life. I got out of prison and I decided, back in those days, so I'm aging myself now, I think. If you are at all aware of the criminal justice system in Minnesota, back in the early 90s, if you were released from any state correctional institution, you were given for free 2-year ride to any state college. And I ended up taking advantage of that, and I went and got an associate's degree in automotive technology. Within 3 years, I was the highest paid technician in Minnesota. I was clearing $3,000 a week. I worked for Ferrari, and I was doing really well, except for I was living check to check. I put a lot of girls through college. They told me they were going to college anyway. And as a result, I did not realize that one of the things looking back is that I got a lot of my identity from what I did. There's an interesting part of the steps. In step 4, we have a fear inventory, and there's a prayer in the fear inventory. And it says, God, please remove my fear and direct my attention to what you would have me be. Now, this has eluded me all of my life. And when I first got sober, what weird wording. Direct my attention to what you would have me be. And I meditated on that for a long time when I was doing this step. And it stuck out to me so much that here's what I came to as a conclusion is, it's not what I was doing that was killing me, it's who I was being. I never felt like I was in the right place at the right time doing the right thing with the right person. I always thought, if I only made a little bit more money or had this guy's job or his girlfriend, maybe it's not her, maybe it's her sister, maybe it's not this house, maybe it's that house, maybe it's not this car, maybe it's that car. And I never was able to find an element of success in my life because I was never content with who I was. If you would have asked me who I was when I walked through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was a liar, I was a thief, obviously. I was a cheat. You couldn't trust me. I was not a good father. I was not a good partner. There was nothing good about me, but that was who I be. That wasn't what I do. And I spent a lot of time in my life trying to compensate for who I be. If you would have asked me who I was back when I walked through the doors, I would have told you I'm a base jumper, skydiver, scuba diver, I race motorcycles, I have a business. Those are things I do. They're not who I be. And I didn't understand that. And one of the things that I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is it doesn't matter what you do. comprehension at that time that this would change my life. Because I thought when it first happened, I had the car towed back to my shop and I was going to fix it before the customer could find out. But all of a sudden, the police got involved and they tracked down the tow truck company, which led them to us. And then I ended up getting in trouble. And so here's this thing. I don't have $200,000 to pay for this car. As you can imagine, I'm snorting it. So I'm standing in front of this insurmountable obstacle that I can't buy my way out of, talk my way out of anymore. And as a process of trying to do that, and at the disagreement of my attorney very verbally, I'm lying to the cops, I'm lying to the investigators, I'm lying to the insurance company. And so here's a little word of advice. If you're ever investigated by an insurance company, any lie that you make to an insurance agent or an insurance officer in the course of an investigation is a felony. So now here I am, 2012, I'm looking at felony insurance fraud and unauthorized use of motor vehicle, and I'm looking at another trip back to the penitentiary. Going from this guy who's making $1 million a year, living the life I think I want, to becoming the person that I was just 15 years before. And nobody told me that everybody's telling me I need to get sober, right? All through my life, and from the age of 12 on, people are like, Dave, you have a drinking problem, you need to not drink. Well, if I could not drink, that would be a great idea. But I seem to not be able to not drink. I used to come here and sit in the back and listen to people and bide my time and try to pick up girls, and I'm sure you guys don't do that anymore. And I just, because it was just going in one ear and out the other. I didn't think, and I got to tell you, looking back, once I started doing the program of recovery, I remember thinking, is it really this simple? Is it really this great that and I was pissed. I was pissed once I started to actually do this work, because this was the best thing that had ever happened to me, and it still to this day is. And I remember thinking, man, if somebody would have just told me about this before. Well, people have been trying to tell it to me for 30 years. The problem is I'm coming in here and mentally doing the steps. I'm doing them intellectually. Yeah, okay, I can see that. I don't know about the power list, but I'm definitely unmanageable, right? So that's an intellectual process. I'm intellectually going through these steps. And it wasn't until I experientially went through these steps. And I don't know if you've ever heard it, but I'll tell you this, these steps are experiential. They're not intellectual. Because step one for me was a gun in my mouth. It was, I'm either going to take my life or something's got to change, because I can't go on living, feeling the way I feel anymore. I can handle the repercussions. I can handle the consequences. I can handle going back to prison if I have to. I can handle the loss of my family, my friends, my loved ones, my job, my money, my cars. I can deal with that. What I can't deal with is waking up every day looking in the mirror wishing I was dead. And that's how I walked in here. August 21st, 2012, I walked through the doors of a treatment center out west in western suburbs. And I didn't know what was going to change, but I knew something was going to change. I just had an overwhelming sensation that my life was going to be significantly different. I had held on to some things, and I walked through the doors, and after about 2 weeks, I'm detoxing. By this time, I'm doing so many opiates that I would eat them, and then I would throw up, which is obviously I'm overdosing, right? And then I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to lose my high, so I have to eat some more. And that's how I walked into this treatment center. After 2 weeks, I'm sober. I'm stark raving sober, and I want to leave. And I'm walking the trail around this treatment center, and I'm doing a lot of meditating at the time. I'm doing a lot of reflecting, and one of the things that I heard somebody say when they came up to the microphone was, people who relapse stop doing three things. They stop going to meetings, they stop talking to a sponsor, and they stop praying and meditating. And obviously, I'm in this treatment center. I have to go to these dumb meetings every day. So check that box off. And then there was a guy named Dan, who was my sponsor at the time, who I later realized was not an alcoholic that we would consider, who was trying to help me get sober. Unfortunately, Dan was a heavy drinker who thought he was an alcoholic. And so Dan's advice to me was, don't drink and come to meetings. If you feel like drinking, call me and we'll talk about it. And unfortunately, I don't have that ability because I'm an alcoholic. I've since been able to take Dan through the steps, so that was a blessing. But so check that box off. All right, I'm talking to a sponsor. And then I got to the third piece that the guy said, we stopped praying and meditating. And I'm thinking about this. I'm like, praying and meditate? What? And then so every awareness I've ever had in my life has started with a question to myself. I'll never have an awareness outside of myself without a question, because if I'm making statements, I think I already know, and I'm walking this path and I'm asking myself questions. Well, why aren't you willing to pray and meditate? Because I don't believe in God. Okay, well, you could still pray and meditate. Well, I don't believe it's going to work because there is no God. And then this awareness came to me. What do you got to lose? You're going to die if you don't try something. Because at that time, I had packed everything I had into my pockets. And I was getting ready to leave, and I was going to walk down to the VFW. I was going to make a phone call to my drug dealer, who was also my best friend at the time. And, oh, by the way, anybody here ever get turned away? Like, you show up at the door with like $1,000 in your pocket, and they're like, no, you need to go home and sleep it off. Anybody? Yes, you are my people. Because at some point, we're even a liability to them, you know? And so, but I thought he was a good friend, because he's like, dude, you're a mess. You need to go get straight. And I thought he liked me, but apparently he liked his business more. Anyways, so I was going to leave, and then that thought occurred to me. What do you got to lose? You're going to die if you don't try something. Because I'll tell you, you addicts who are shooting up, you made it look great. You made it sound amazing, and that was my next thing. And I knew that the way that I did blow and drank and all this other stuff, if I approached the needle in that fashion, I would be dead in a week. And so I said the first honest prayer I ever meant, and I'll shorten it up a little because there was some swearing in there, but God, I don't know who you are or even if you're real, but if you are, I need help because I'm going to die. Now, angels didn't fly out of the heavens. Nothing crazy happened, but I will tell you the exact time, place, and moment that I met God, and it was right there. It was on that path. And it's not that I met God, right? God didn't come down and talk to me or anything, but for the first time in my life, it felt as though my mind was clear, like my problem was solved. Because in the only way I can describe it to anybody else is that for the first time in my life, I became willing to do something I didn't believe in. Something that you said would work that I have no background in. And up until this point, I'm doing everything like I have it all laid out, right? I'm going to go to this treatment center, I'm going to go to this halfway house, and then I'm going to do this, and I'm structuring all this stuff. And what I don't realize is that's still my plan. That's still the way I'm engineering everything. And if I have any background, that is that everything that I ever do has failed to keep me sober. And so for the first time, I said the first prayer I ever meant. And it's become a pivotal point in my life. I still, to this day, pray and meditate every morning, every evening. And because the God idea is elusive to me, I pray and meditate to the God in the big book. I don't pray and meditate to the God anywhere else. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So that's what happened. Now, let's talk about how it happened as I run out of time. the prayer meditation thing was a big one, only because I don't believe in God and I don't believe in prayer meditation. And so I started doing a lot of research surrounding prayer meditation and spirituality and religion and God and all these things. And what I realized, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier, is that God, spirituality, and religion are all independent of each other. And the reason that I grouped it all together, because when I would hear the word spiritual or spirituality, I would immediately, my mind would jump to God and Jesus and church and things like that. And it wasn't until I actually, because I had to make sense of this stuff. I got to tell you, when I walked in here, I might have been broke, but I was living in the strip club, doing rails and, doing what you do in the VIP area by yourself with lots of money. And that wasn't a horrible life. It was certainly not as fulfilling because, obviously people who are fulfilled aren't thinking about putting a gun in their mouth. But the weird thing about addiction and alcoholism is no matter how horrible it is, we still find a way to justify it in our heads as to being okay. Like, this is great, right? And I used to think that was an amazing life and so much fun. And now I just realize how shallow, it's just, anyways. But you're asking me to give up this life, the only life that I know that's ever brought me even a distinct or remote possibility of happiness, for this idea that may or may not work. And I see a lot of people coming in and leaving, a lot of people coming and going and getting 24-hour chips every week. And I'm like, well, obviously this doesn't work. But then I also see this other group of people who are talking about steps, sponsorship, working with others and being of service. And these guys are talking about 10 unfathomable numbers, 10, 20 years, right? And then I also see this other group of people who are talking about, I have 20 years of sobriety and I want to kill myself. So there's that group, right? And so as a newcomer coming in, I don't have a lot of people. I'm not asking you questions. I'm going to figure this out. And so I'm sitting back and I'm watching what's going on, and there's this huge dynamic, and it's hard to make sense of. And so there's a lot of things that I'm listening to and interpreting which are not correct. For instance, somebody caught my attention once. They got up here and they said, meetings are not part of the program of recovery. And I'm like, what? What do you mean they're not part of the program of recovery? And he said, listen, you can sit in meetings all your life and never work the program because the program's in the book. And he said, you can work the program, you can buy this book, go home, work the program, and never step foot in the meeting. And it blew my mind. And he said, the meetings will not keep you sober. The program will. And so at that point, I started to study the background and the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, because I'm not walking into this thing without any research. I need to be sure that these guys are real. And so as I started to study it, one of the things, now I've lost my glasses. One of the things that I really was interested in was the early history. In the forward to the second edition, they start to throw out some numbers. So in the forward of the second edition, what they say is, AA grew by leaps and bounds. For this, there were two principal reasons: the large numbers of recoveries and reunited homes. So they're talking about the time from 1955 to 1936 when Bill and Bob met. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Bill Wilson got sober in November 1935. He met Dr. Bob in 1936. That was the formation of Alcoholics Anonymous. So Bill had been sober for roughly 6 months before he met Bob. So from 1936 to 1939, they had amassed roughly 100 people. And 100 people started following this kind of recipe, if you will, as to how to stay sober. And they had such huge success that they decided to publish the book. And that was in 1939. So when I walk in here, I'm looking at the guys with 20, 30 years of experience saying, hey, I'm 30 years sober. And those are the guys I'm going to for sobriety. But how sober was Bill and Bob when they wrote the book? 2.5 years. The average member of Alcoholics Anonymous at that time had roughly 1 year of sobriety. That's not a lot. I have over 8 years, and I couldn't write the book. So, but these guys with single-digit sobriety started this thing and wrote this book and put this together as a roadmap for us. If you've ever baked a cake, on the front they got a picture of the perfect cake, and on the back they have some instructions, right? Heat your oven to 6,000 degrees, get 2 eggs, beat them, put them in the mix, do whatever. And they specifically say, if you follow these instructions, you should get this result. And that's what they were trying to accomplish with the book. They're like, listen, here's what we did. Here's our experience. And that's why we come to share our experience. So my experience in this is that once I started to listen and apply the experience of these guys, I started to get these results. And if you're new in here, when I first walked in, you're asking me to commit my life to this process. And today in the rooms of recovery, we talk about really low number recovery rates. Sometimes 3 to 5% is thrown around. I'm not sitting down with a pen and paper for a 3 to 5% chance that this is going to work. Are you kidding me? I've never been top of my class in school. You think I'm going to be top of my class here? Not going to happen. So I started to really research. I mean, something had to be different when they first started writing this book. So looking back from 1955 to 1939, here's what they say. Of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. That's a significant difference between the recovery rates we see today in the rooms and the numbers back then. But it gets better. 25% sobered up after some relapses. So now they're talking about a 75% chance of recovery if I try this. And among the remainder, those who stayed on with AA showed improvement. Other thousands, notice the distinction they give. At first came to a few AA meetings and decided they didn't want the program. We would come to the meeting and then learn about the program and then grab a sponsor and go out and work that program with the meeting. This was never intended to be the place where I get and stay sober. This was intended to be the place where I come to connect with somebody who had done this work, be paired up with them so they can take me through their experience of doing this work. That's what this is meant to be. I can sit in this room all my life and never work the program, and I can work the program and never step foot in this meeting. But great numbers of these, about 2 out of 3 began to return as time passed. So if 2 out of 3, if 25% of those guys stay sober, now we're up to about an 80 to 86% success rate. That's a significant difference. Now, I'm a gambling man. Occasionally I like to go to the casino. This table over here is paying out 3 to 5% of the time. This table over here is paying out 80 to 86% of the time. Which table do you think I'm going to sit down at? So when I started to do this, I started going to big book meetings. I started going to big book studies. Because there's something different with what they were doing back then that is going on today. Otherwise, we wouldn't have such significant swing in recovery rates. Because a lot of the things that I started to see in the rooms, and one of the reasons why I really limited what meetings I would go to is because I needed this. I'm not interested in physical sobriety because it sucks. I've done it. Because as the doctor explains in the doctor's opinion, once we remove the alcohol, we're still left with this mental obsession. I sponsored a guy at 1 month sober who had been sober for 19 years. And he walked into my office and he said, I don't know what happened to you or what you're doing different, but I need whatever it is because I'm going to kill myself. And we had an opportunity over the next few months. I had an opportunity to take him through the book. And he was a heroin addict at the time. And he said after 19 years free, he still had daily cravings. Like it was very, very difficult for him. And we started to go through this work, and he walked into my office probably a month later, and he said, I don't know when, I don't know where, but it's gone. He said, in 19 years, I've never felt peace like this. That's the power of this thing. So we talked a little bit about that. What it's like today. In throughout the program, I'm going to have to make friends with this idea of God, and even today, if you were to ask me to paint you a picture of what I think God looks like, I don't think I could, because I really don't give it a lot of thought. I just believe that there's a power out there. I believe that for some of us, it's the person next to us. For some of us, when I was sitting in here at roughly a month sober, it started, we talk about living in faith or fear. And I believe that there's a transition, and that transition piece is hope. Because guys who had done this before me would show up in a suit and come and stand here and tell you about what it was like for them and how they've transgressed that and what it's like today. And it gave me some hope, because here I have this guy telling me exactly how I was feeling at that time and saying today it's 100% different. Because today I be different. I would hope, I mean, I have a daughter now, she's 2. She's awesome. If you want to see videos, ask me after. I have a daughter, I have a career, and those are things I do. But the person I be, I would hope that if you were to walk up to somebody who knows me today and ask, hey, tell me about Dave. He's a loving father. That's something you be. That's not something you do. He's committed to his daughter. He's ethical in business. That's something you be. That's not something you do. Because the person I be today is way better than the person I be when I walked in here. And so one of the things I started to do was, without any background in religion or God or anything, these guys are saying, hey, if you do it exactly the way we did it, you should get these results. And so I started to do, I had no background in prayer meditation, so I jumped to step 11, which is where they give us morning meditation and evening review. And I've been doing that consistently every day of my sobriety. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but I try to do it. See ya. I'd leave too. Anyways, so one of the things, it's really interesting, because when I started to really research the idea of prayer meditation, there was a spiritual author back in the 1800s by the name of Soren Kierkegaard. And Soren Kierkegaard said, prayer is not meant to alter the mind of God. It's meant to change the nature of the person who prays. I'll say that again. Prayer is not meant to alter the mind of God. It's not meant to get God to do anything. It's meant to change the person who prays. And that's what prayer and meditation has done for me, is it's changed me. Right? So in the morning meditation, one of the first things I lead out with is, before we begin, we ask God, whatever that looks like, to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. And I don't know about you, but those are 3 things that I got to be constantly aware of every day in my own life. And so I think as I really start to sit and meditate on how they've laid out the meditations in the big book, you ever have a first thought in the morning and it follows you all day long? What they're saying is, put this thought there, right? Be on guard for this idea. Be aware of this. And so as I start to do this more and more, within a month, I'm watching my life change. The way I treat people change. The way I interact with people change. The things that I used to really put a lot of value in, money, success, all of these things, they start to change. All of a sudden, your success is more important than mine. Your well-being takes a forefront to mine. And that's not something that I ever imagined would happen to me. I'm one of the most selfish assholes you'd know. But all of a sudden, I start to see this change in my life. And so the prayers and meditations in the big book were the one thing. And so what I've done is, at 1 month of sobriety, I created this template for prayer and meditation. It's directly out of the big book. I laminate the sheets, I print it out. It's just step-by-step process of what they're asking me to keep in mind. They're up here, they're printed out, they're on the table. If you want them, take them. For me, I laminate them, and the way that happened is I was running late for work one day, and I knew this was important, and I took it in the shower with me. It disintegrated. So ever since then, I've been laminating them. But you're free to take one of each. And my only promise to you is if you really do it, your life will change. What I found as a result of this is that this has given me an inner peace that I never imagined would happen. In the doctor's opinion, they allude to the idea that alcohol and drugs aren't the problem. They're the solution. So I have to find a way to be, right? Because prior to finding this solution, my solution to everything, good day, let's drink. Bad day, I need a drink, right? Because it would level the playing field. It would make me okay. And what I found is since doing this work, the steps have virtually nothing to do with alcohol at all. If you have the opportunity to go through them and study them and sit down with somebody, you'll find that we stop talking about alcohol after step one. It's because then we start talking about our emotions. We start talking about our thinking. And we start talking about our attachments. Because those are the things that are going to cause me to act out in certain ways. I think that's all the time I have. So I'll be around if anybody wants to chat. Otherwise, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dave, for coming all the way to Northfield to share your experience, strength, and hope. Everyone is welcome to remain after the meeting and thank our speaker and visit with each other. Please help me close with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Have a good, warm night. I'm gonna start taking pictures.